Well, no buts about it. 2014 was a horrendous year for hedge funds. On average, hedge funds returned just 2% last year. Many of them shut down. Yet a few funds managed to find some big gems along the way to help them reach the top ranks of Bloomberg Market's annual ranking of the best performing hedge funds. Who was on top? This man, activist investor Bill Ackman. His fund, Pershing Square, returned nearly 33% thanks to winning bets on Allergan and Canadian Pacific Railroad. Well, Bloomberg's Katrina Brooker wrote the cover story on Ackman, spent some time with him as well. Greg Rayburn of Kobe Partners staying with me through this hour as my guest host. So, Katrina, you got to know Bill Ackman.
I did.
We'll go through that in a little bit. But first, his winning strategy. I mean, Allergan was a big play, right?
It was a big play. I mean, it was really an interest. I think it was one of the most interesting stories of 2014.
It was.
One, because there was just so much drama on both sides. I thought Allergan CEO David Pyatt, he played it just in such an amazing way that you sort of felt like it was a battle of two equals in some ways. And they both ended up winning in the end. And that was just the strangest twist in November when Allergan escaped Valiant and Pershing Square's bid to go into, I guess now get married to activists.
Right.
Not to be confused with activists.
Yes. As if this story wasn't confusing enough already, yes. But Bill Ackman himself kind of pushed things to the edge, though, right, in Allergan and Valiant.
I think it was a very provocative deal, just from the start. I mean, I think what the analysts that I talked to from the start, they were shocked just at how the deal came about. So, you know, there are all these questions about Pershing Square and Valiant, how they'd bought up shares of Allergan leading into the deals, prior to the deal's announcement, and then it suddenly hit Wall Street as a total surprise.
Right.
There was one analyst that I spoke to who wrote a report saying, how can this be legal? It is, that initial bid was legal.
According, yeah.
There have been questions. I mean, there's a class action lawsuit.
Yeah. So this whole story goes on.
It goes on.
And this story is the gift that keeps on giving. But
for reporters.
Yeah, for reporters especially. But Greg, I think it just points to the larger issue, though, that Ackman represents sort of this big breed now of activist investors. I think every CEO in this country has got to be worried about a Bill Ackman type going into their company.
Look, I think he did the right thing in that scenario, and he's killing it right now. I think CEOs really shouldn't be worried, and boards shouldn't be worried. What they should be doing is doing the right things for their shareholders. Where I draw the line on activism in general is time frame. I'm not as supportive of someone who's going to come in and make change, and then sort of bail out 3 months later, 6 months later.
Like a flipper, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Dan Loeb at Yahoo, for example. I mean, I think if the time frame,
or Sotheby's or something
if the point of the activism is done within a long-term time frame, right? Even though I know people are trying to make money now, then I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and I think it's probably better for stocks and companies and better for boards to be challenged that way.
But that is Ackman's strategy, right? I mean, look at what he did.
Yes.
It was a losing bet, JCPenney, so far.
Right.
But he stuck with JCPenney, right? I mean, he was very active.
Until last year.
Until last year, right. But, I mean, he was, this is not about him trying to make a big buck and going.
No,
he lost.
I think when I spoke to him, I think that his strategy is long-term, and I think that that's how he thinks of himself. I think probably his critics would say something otherwise. But I think that if you're an individual shareholder, and I think that that's how probably some of us have to think about it, I just don't know that it's a bad thing to have people like Bill Ackman out there agitating, making points that certain boards, certain CEOs might need to make changes. But I do agree with you about the long-term frame. I mean, and also it gets complicated when you look at companies that are good companies and strong companies and companies that have been delivering to their shareholders, and I think that's why
still are the subject of activist investors.
And I think that's why Allergan became so
such
controversial.
Yeah.
And I think that it was. I mean,
but he was right.
He was right.
The point goes back to, I think that it is a good thing. Look, every activist investor is going to have mistakes. right? It's no different than venture capital. You know, venture capitalists do 10 and they hope to survive, right? Your ratio better be better as an activist investor, but you're still going to have mistakes. A JCPenney can happen. Herbalife, right? I think for some period of time he had the trade wrong. Carl had the trade right, but Ackman may be right long term now, right? As that thing is turning down. So again, it's
that's ongoing too.
Well, and just quickly, I mean, because I mentioned this, you spent some time with Bill Ackman.
Yes.
And he's what, sort of down to earth? He gossips. You said he gossips.
Well, I mean, he is an entertaining guy. He's complicated. He's got a lot of energy, a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
I think what was interesting to me is before meeting him, I talked to a lot of people about him, and so you go in expecting one thing, you know, and I think
did you come out with something else?
More nuanced, more complicated. I think that he really believes what he. I mean, in my story, I quote him as saying, you know, that he really sees himself as one of the good guys, one of the people who's fighting on behalf of the shareholders. And I think that there's, you know, his critics who feel the exact opposite. And so it's one of these he's one of these interesting characters where people feel so strongly about him one way or another.
Yeah.
But I do think he has this ability to kind of get people talking about these subjects like activism, which are important, and it's an important debate.
He's one of these people who carries a lot of heat around him, you know, so there's always a lot of heat. So I think that whatever he says or does, people are going to, you know, latch onto it. Katrina, thank you so much. Katrina Brooker of Bloomberg Markets Magazine.